Back to human extinction because of AI. This is what I came to talk about today. Humanity itself may be the real issue in what's happening on our planet today. So I'm going to start this out by bringing into your awareness an event that occurred right after nuclear warfare started with the bombing of Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Einstein was abhorred with what had occurred with his discovery of the theory of relativity. And so he and Bertrand Russel came together and put together what's called the Russel-Einstein Manifesto. And it had quite a far-reaching effect on the planet to the point where it divided science itself. The manifesto boiled down to two sentences in the end at the conference that was called. The first sentence was, "Remember your humanity." The second sentence was, "And forget the rest." Russell so believed in what he and Einstein had put forth at this gathering in the creation of the Russel-Einstein Manifesto that the last three words on his deathbed were, "Remember your humanity." So, this gets me into Human 3.0. I'm going to use this as a very simplistic definition for right now, just so that we can communicate. I'm not saying this is the way it has to be, but just for this talk and for our communication, I'm using Human 1.0 as what we typically think of the hunter-gatherer from early times into the time of the Renaissance, in which man was in harmony with nature. I'm saying Human 2.0 is the industrial man, where both philosophy and science moved into the concept that man had to conquer nature, which we still have occurring today. If you don't believe it, just look at our ecological disasters that have been going on. All right, for definition's sake, because this is where we're heading, whether you know it or not, Human 3.0 is what I call the hybrid. This is more than just using technology as a useful tool. This is the incorporation of technology into our physical being. And this is much closer than you realize, as you'll see with the picture of 6 of 7, which is the Borg hybrid from Star Trek Voyager series. And some of what is already starting to show up in the marketplace with the Google Glass and what are called synthesis devices. Synthesis, which is a new technological term where instead of our working with the computer, we take the computer into parts of our body. They already have research of this where you literally walk around with a device and it literally interacts with your body, sends out holographic representations of keyboards, of screens. You literally can take a picture of just doing this. And this device on you takes a picture, stores it away, sends it off to your cloud file, and there you are. Hybrid type synthesis that is already starting to show up. This is why I'm talking about this. This is why I am beating the drum about this. We need to be careful about where we're going with technology. It's one thing to have technology as a tool. It's quite another thing to lose our own humanity over it. I am not joking when I tell you that NSA is already aware of this. There have been whistleblowers that have come forward releasing information much different than what Snowden released, in which they are seriously moving toward this hybridization of humanity. And here's why. This is an article taken from Live Science. The title is Brain-to-Brain Link Makes Mind Control Possible. I'll read this in case you guys in the back cannot see it. It says, humans can be much more efficient communicators if they could bypass language altogether and directly transmit thoughts, ideas, and instructions from one brain to another. Scientists have demonstrated that instant brain-to-brain communication could become a reality with the help of computers. In recent experiments, researchers from the University of Washington showed what could send one person's thoughts through a computer to control the hand motion of another person sitting half a mile away. I emphasize brain control, and I also emphasize with the help of computers. I submit to you that we are being brainwashed into believing that we need computers to do this. We don't. You just got a taste of it with a simple glass sitting on the shelf there. All right. So what is looking at us in the face here? What choices are we going to have to seriously explore now? Not in the future, now. So Stuart Hameroff and Roger Penrose have made a major discovery of the brain, and actually even beyond the brain, in what's called quantum coherence with microtubules. In a bit, I'll give you a little more description of what microtubules are, but right now I just want to show you that what they have discovered really gives us hints of either human 3.0 or hints of our own human greatness. Now, Hameroff and Penrose for the last 5 years have been bombarded with criticism about the role of consciousness in science. And instead of being swept aside, which is what normally happens when the status quo is challenged, they instead have come back with serious research which has blown away the criticism. So they now stand on solid ground where neuroscientists are now fighting for their own scientific stronghold. Because Hameroff and Penrose are the only ones who have been able to demonstrate that human consciousness does govern reality and not the other way around. All right, so just a little bit of background on what they've done with consciousness. The origin of consciousness, quote, the origin of consciousness reflects our place in the universe, the nature of our existence. Did consciousness, now, because originally when they came out with this, they believed that human consciousness was restricted only to the body and specifically the brain. In the last 2 years, they have had to modify that, and now they have broadened it where consciousness can and does exist outside of the body. Okay, so this is why I'm making this distinction. It's an important distinction. All right, so did consciousness, small c, which I'm calling human consciousness, evolve from complex computations among brain neurons, as most scientists assert, or has consciousness, with a big C, in some sense been here all along, as spiritual approaches maintain? You can imagine why the neuroscience field is shaking in its boots when these guys are starting to equate spirituality along with consciousness and science. My success as a best-selling author has been the ability to bring the esoteric together with the scientific. It's why I love these two scientists, because they are doing the same thing in the field of science. All right, to continue. Hameroff says, quote, this opens a potential Pandora's box, but our theory accommodates both these views, suggesting consciousness derives from quantum vibrations in microtubules. There that word is again. Inside brain neurons, which both govern neuronal and synaptic function and connect brain processes to self-organizing processes in the fine scale, what Hameroff calls proto-consciousness, or quantum structure of reality, referred to as, quote-unquote, density matrix. In layperson's terms, what he is saying and what they are proving even further is that reality is what we decide it is. Reality is what we decide it is. And the evidence is far-reaching. So what does this mean? It means human consciousness creates reality, collapsing quantum wave potentials, but it also reveals that human consciousness can be programmed like a computer language. Research done out of MIT in the last 3 years by one of its lead scientists, James Gates Jr., literally has discovered this computer language. He calls them Adinkra symbols. Now, as much as I could spend an entire 2 hours alone on what James Gates Jr. has discovered, given even further credit to this notion about density matrix, in a presentation before the Asimov conference, James Gates Jr. literally comes right out and says to all these leading scientists at this conference, I have to face the possible reality that we are indeed living in a matrix.
Consciousness can be programmed. Scary, of course. But are we talking about the brain can be programmed, the mind can be programmed, or consciousness itself? Can you say a little more about that?
That's a very good question. First of all, the brain can be programmed. It can be taken over, which has clearly been demonstrated by the research done at the University of Washington. Okay? Now, by programming and controlling the brain, then we put ourselves in a position of being brainwashed. And in brainwashing, we can be dummied down to the point where we believe we cannot do things. And if we believe we cannot do things, then we don't do them. And consequently, consciousness is then affected. You heard the response when I showed quantum entanglement here. Do you remember the response? No way! I submit to you, we have been programmed already to say, no way. And I'm here to tell you, way. All right, so this also means that we can do communication brain to brain without computers. How? All right, a little more in depth about microtubules. These are these little tubes that are made up of molecules, and they literally take 13 molecules to create a ring. And so these rings then create tubes. And these exist in the brain neurons. But they not only exist in the brain neurons, they exist in every cell in our body. Every cell. But what's most fascinating is the microtubules in the human brain. These little teeny tiny little tubes, which comprise one entire layer of each cell wall, means that we have trillions and trillions of these in our body. Trillions and trillions. Okay? Now, what Penrose basically has discovered is that these little tubes, which have a very special kind of water in the middle of them, some would call it structured water, some would call it more than that, literally turns them into what are called Bose-Einstein condensates.